there, I'm Kat. Thank you for joining me for a chat with Kat. We're going on a journey and having conversations with people from a variety of backgrounds and experiences. And during this journey, we're going to probably laugh and smile. We'll have moments of compassion and cry. We may be angry or feel confronted, and we may be amazed and just need to ponder. So, whatever the emotion is that comes up, let's take a moment to breathe and ask ourselves why we're feeling this. And also, let's ask, what can I learn from this? So go ahead and like, share, subscribe, and make sure that your friends and family and colleagues and anyone you feel could get something from this gets to see this. So let's get on with our journey with Chat with Kat. Well, hi Drake, how's it going?
Great, great. How are you?
Good, thanks. So I know you from our group. It's Self Perfected. We do our calls on Fridays. So I just saw you.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people who are going to come and see our conversation probably have no idea who you are. So why don't you just tell me a bit about you?
Hi, I'm Drake. I am living in Orlando, Florida right now with my family. I've got a beautiful wife, two awesome children, and I run a education business here in Orlando, where we help families get the greatest education that they can for themselves, their children, and to better their lives. And so part of that is we have, um, man, man, how deep do you want to go, Catherine? How deep do you want to go right off the bat?
Hey, this is just a conversation. You go as deep as you want, right? Like
Sure.
share what you want with us.
Okay, so I'll share this. The group that we're both a part of, Self Perfected, is really, it's really about, uh, man, I'm trying to describe it in a way that's like accessible for somebody who's not a part of it. But I guess to give some background, I grew up um, in a home near Orlando with my grandmother and my mother, and we had a lot of nice things because my grandmother had a business, and and we didn't want for very many things like material things. However, I did not grow up with my father in the home, and so there were some things that growing up I could see, hey, things could be better, and I wished that those things were better as I was growing up. And I thought that the life that I had was pretty normal. I didn't think it was extraordinarily bad or extraordinarily great. I just thought it was pretty average, run of the mill, and an experience that virtually anybody could have, and that most people do have, or some to some extent. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized, the desire that I had for wanting things to be better and wanting it to be more, um, that I realized, oh, you know what? I can actually achieve that. And I attempted to achieve that for a long time, doing various things, reading books and going to seminars and things like that. And it just always seemed to elude me, just a little bit. And what I mean by that is I would feel better listening to audios or reading books or going to events. I would always feel better and I would learn things for sure. And I felt like I had a much more positive attitude and outlook on life. But what I also noticed was that the reality of my physical world, the things that I was living on a day-to-day basis wasn't getting better. It wasn't actually changing much. Perhaps I would feel like, I'm just not going to let this person bother me, or this situation bother me. And so I felt better about those things. But the reality was, the situation that I was living in many cases, if you looked at it objectively, not from how I was experiencing it, but rather what was happening, you could say, well, it doesn't look like things are getting better. It looks like things are getting worse.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I found certain people that are now key parts of this group that we've created, Self-Perfected, and the a lot of the things that we share within that group. It wasn't until I found all that I realized, wow, I was kind of on a path where I was becoming content with uh, just the situation of my life, and just really resigning myself to it's not going to get much better, and I'm just going to be okay. I have to be okay with this, right? And so this group is really for people who've had like a similar experience to that, and can see and man, I did not see all these things back when this group got started, but now it's become really clear. Can see just the general pace of where our society is going is kind of like on a downward trend as far
Yeah.
as are things getting better for the average person? And you always hear like you'll hear people like, well, in general, crime is down and we have this amazing technology and so things for the average person are better,
Mm.
and you should be grateful. And I don't disagree, right? But also, but also, um, you know, the average person today is, I think there was a poll that was done recently, and I couldn't tell you how many people were polled or who exactly the demographics were, but it was Americans. And what it basically amounted to was about 70% or so of the people who were polled said that they feel at least some discomfort when shopping at the grocery store, some
Mm.
financial discomfort when shopping at the grocery store. And I take that to mean, well, I can see that a lot of people are, you know, they're in a very tight financial position right now. And it doesn't seem to be getting better for a lot of people.
Mm.
Um, if we go into, all of what's going on in the world and everything, uh, clearly, a lot of young people today are having a harder time purchasing homes, finding relationships that are meaningful, having children, all these things that in the past were kind of taken for granted, you could say, right? And I say all that, it's kind of a long-winded way to say that our group is for people who are recognizing that and saying, well, you know what? I don't want that to be my path. I'm not just going to go willingly if that's the path that everybody's meant to go on. No, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to choose a different decision. And in fact, I think that I want what's best for me and for everyone around me. And I'm going to actually put in my lot to make that happen. And so that's what this group is about, the Self-Perfected group. And that's what we are actively creating together and supporting each other to do. And really, some people, you know how some people might say that um, they're called to do something in life.
Mhm.
This is really my calling. This is really it. And I mean that in the sense of not that I'm naturally gifted at this, but rather I see the need for it and I feel called to it. I feel like compelled that I need to share what we have in this group, and what our vision is, and what our community is, and all what that's all about. And I need to share this with as many people as possible because, man, it's something that's completely changed my life. And every week, whenever we get on, I see dozens of other people who the same can be said about them, that it's completely changed their lives. And I've actually seen how their lives have changed. And me personally, I'm the kind of person who like if I find something good, I want to share it. Like if I go to a
Mhm.
good restaurant, like I can't wait to share it with my friends. I can't wait to share it. And it's not just like I want to tell them about it. I want to go there with them and show like I want to enjoy it with them. You know, I'm the kind of person that's like, and try this, order this on the menu. And they're like, okay. And then we eat it and I'm like, isn't it so great? Like, you feel that texture. Like I'm really big into food and all that stuff. But and that's how I feel about this group, the people within it, the community that we have, the tools that we share, all of it, the vision that we have. I'm like, dude, I want to share this with people, and especially with those who recognize for themselves, you know what? I don't want to just resign myself to the path that I've been quote unquote given, the
Mhm.
cards that I've been dealt. I don't want to just resign myself to like, this is what my lot in life is going to be. But rather, who the people who are looking and they say, you know what? I'm willing to do something different to have a different result, you know? And so that's a little bit about me.
No, that's great. Thank you. And I mean, you mentioned that you were doing like the books and the audios and the conferences or
Yeah,
meetings and trying on this path of personal growth, let's say, right? Because you knew there was something else for you. So, what did your relationships look like at that time as you're on this path?
man. Um, like I said, I grew up with my grandmother and my mom. For the majority of my childhood, I lived at my grandmother's house with my mom. And that's because there was no father in my life. So there was no uh, like father figure even. So my mom was not married, and my grandmother was previously married to my grandfather, but then that long before I was born, they had separated, right?
Mm,
And so there was no real like man, father figure, I could say, that I lived with at all. I had uncles and folks like that, but what I'm trying to say is I did not see a healthy relationship modeled in front of me.
mm,
And that wasn't just the case for my grandmother and my mom, but I could say a great many people, the people that I was closest to, that was the story of their lives. Maybe I could count on one hand how many people in uh, in my life growing up were actually married and stayed in their committed relationship and didn't just have a kid and separate and have that kind of story. The vast majority, that's the vast majority of my family members. That's
mm,
what their story was. They had a kid with somebody and they weren't able to make it work out. So that was um, my experience as I was getting to those ages where you start dating and thinking about the opposite sex and all of that. Um, I just had a terrible, terrible time getting into relationships. I was not good at it, for one. Um, and I didn't understand women. Even though I grew up with women, I found them to be very alien to me. I would look at my mom a lot of the times and I would go, how are we related? And so, yeah, relationships were very difficult, even and I'll share this. It's, you know, could be seen as embarrassing, and I was embarrassed about it at the time. But I remember buying books from, dating gurus or pickup coaches or, folks like that, and buying their courses online and spending lots of money on that because it was a serious pain point for me. It was such a big pain point of, will I ever figure out this relationship thing? Like, I want a relationship. I did,
mhm,
but it just seemed impossible. It just seemed like I'm not sure how this will ever work out, or the women that I'm interested in are not interested in me, or even when I did find someone who was interested in me, for whatever reason, I would just sabotage it. And it wasn't like I was doing that consciously. I just couldn't help myself. And I just felt like, what's gonna happen in my life? Like, am I gonna be lonely for the rest of my life? That's seriously how I thought about it. And eventually I I made this, I came up with some idea in my mind that eventually I will find somebody who I will have a child with, but
Mhm.
then I'm gonna have to raise that child on my own because there's no way that I'm going to be able to make a relationship work out with somebody. It's just like it just seemed unfathomable to me at that time. So yeah, that's what my relationships were like.
So, how did you go from that as your frame for relationships to now being married with two children?
Man, long story. Um, but I'll give you the highlights of it. Um, so I guess it would have been about 7 years ago. Yeah, about 7 years ago. I was talking with this guy Cameron, and we had known each other from one of these meetings that I had attended. And in fact, it was on a cruise ship that we both just happened to meet. And because I live in Orlando area, after the cruise took off from like Cape Canaveral. After the cruise, um, he said, "Hey, me and my wife are going to be in Orlando for a couple of days. Um, if you're not doing anything, would you like to hang out?" And we like I said, we connected on the cruise. It was cool,
Mhm.
and so we hung out afterwards. And after that, we kind of exchanged like Facebook information and all of that, and we just kept in contact. And after that meeting, I saw that on Facebook, I would, see his. This was back when Facebook used to show you your friends. You remember
Mhm.
that?
Mhm.
But I remember I would see his posts and I'd be scrolling by, and I just noticed there were a couple of things going on at that time. One was um, this was before Donald Trump had gotten elected, right?
Mhm.
So for the first time. So one of the things that I noticed was when I would see his posts sometimes, he was talking about uh, Trump, and and he was being very, I guess you could say like bold about the statements that he was making. Oh, um, but he was being very bold about the statements that he was making about like, hey, Trump is going to win, and I found that very interesting because at that time, it was very much like if you're a Trump supporter, then you're a bigot or a racist or something to that effect. And he wasn't saying it in a racist way or a controversial way, but just by the fact of him saying, I think Trump is going to win. I've been watching some of his rallies, etc. And he was just putting up these points. And as I was watching that, I was like, wow, this guy's not afraid to be controversial. Because, of course, in the comments, everyone's like, how dare you? Like, are you crazy? All this stuff, right?
Mhm.
And then the other thing that I noticed, which caught my attention even more, was I was noticing that his life was changing. Like, I could see, oh, he just bought a house. Oh, he just bought another house, and that house looks nicer. He's slimmed down. He looks really healthy. He's getting invited to these pretty big parties where the cars that are out front or the house that he's walking up to is like a mansion, and
Mhm.
just the people that he was being introduced to. I'm like, okay, his life I could see like through the looking glass. I'm
Mhm.
like, his life is getting better. It looks really cool. Like those are the things that I want. He just had a kid, and I was like, wow, okay, that's cool. I'd like to reconnect with him, because some years had passed. And I was like,
Mhm.
I'd like to reconnect with him and see what's going on in his life. And we did reconnect, and we started chatting. And I was like, I've been seeing all this stuff going on in your life. And he's like, yeah, would you like to know how I'm doing that? And I'm like, yes, please. And I knew he had a business, And so I figured it had maybe something to do with his business. And and he told me about Tech Tutor, and I was like, you know what? That sounds really interesting and sounds like something that I would like to implement in my life. I'd like to use in my life. And and so anyway, I started using Tech Tutor shortly after that. And one of the first conversations that I had after getting this tool that basically just to give you like the Reader's Digest of that, it's like, hey, there's this tool that you can use to reprogram your mind. And one of the things that I was really focused on was how can I reprogram my mind because something is going wrong back here, like something up here is not working, and I'm trying to figure out, like I want to do this, I want a relationship, or I want to build this for myself, whatever it was, and and I'm like, and that I keep falling down a pit. What is going on? So anyway. Um, when I heard, okay, I could reprogram my mind and like actually get what I want, I'm in. And one of the first conversations that I had after getting this was, okay, how are your relationships? And I'm like, absolutely terrible. Like what relationships,
Mm.
And and then the follow-up question to that was, okay, well, how's your relationship with your mom? And I was like, woof. Not good. Like at that time, I was like, no, it is, I just don't like her and we don't get along. And I've been avoiding her phone calls, all those sorts of things, right? And
Mhm.
so uh I started looking at uh my relationship with my mother and why it was like how I thought about her, how I thought about women in general. And then I realized like, oh, I've got a terrible relationship with the concept of women in my mind. And so that's what I ended up reprogramming, right? Um, and through that, I started seeing like, oh, wow, no wonder I'm having a terrible time getting into relationships with women or staying in a relationship because that's all messed up. And then through that, it also helped me to reestablish my self-esteem as well. Because then I started to see like, oh, like I was really taking like okay, if you can imagine being a young guy and feeling like um I just could not make any relationship work and nothing went my way, it seemed in that realm anyway. And seeing my friends around me like they're not having problems with this, it was really a hit to my self-esteem, you know?
Mm.
And I I started to look at myself as like I said, it's never going to happen for me. It's just not in the cards. And that was really, really depressing, right? And so with reprogramming that within myself, uh, my self-esteem obviously went up. My relationship with women improved. And then through this group, Self Perfected, I found somebody else, my wife, Christine, who she came into the group and she shared in the principles that we share in this group, which are um, the very first principles, the principle of what is best for all, considering all things, plants, people, animals,
Mhm.
the earth, all of it. And when you're making decisions, taking into account, is this going to have an effect that would be best for everybody involved in this situation, or am I just being selfish? You know? And she's somebody who agreed with these principles. And she was also single at that time. And I was like, hey, hello, hi. Glad to see you here. And we got to talking. And obviously, eventually we started a relationship and we got married. And it was really cool because uh, you know, it took it took a while. It wasn't like it happened overnight, right? Um, but I could see my progress every step of the way. It wasn't this sort of, um, how sometimes people will share a story and it just seems like, well, that could never happen to me
Hmm.
because the circumstances of what happened with them is like, it just was like so lucky. It was like this thing fell out of the sky and then this happened and that. And then all of a sudden I'm here. Wow. But it could never be replicated. You
Hmm.
couldn't repeat that. But for myself, I could see every step of the way how I was changing, what I was doing differently to the point where, oh, like it was just inevitable that I would end up here from the steps that I took, right? Um, yeah, and so anyway, that is how I ended up in a relationship from being a complete, I'll say it, loser. And that's where I was, right? To having the relationship of my dreams, quite frankly. Yeah.
Wow. That's really encouraging for people who are single and looking for someone and going, why can't I get in a relationship? Why can't I have a good relationship with anybody? Why does it never last? That's
Yeah.
really encouraging for people to realize that there is a way to do that. And it does take kind of looking at yourself and going, what's not working here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And like right now, I think it's getting even harder for people to get into meaningful relationships. Um, when Christine and I met, it was during lockdowns of COVID, right? And it was also so if you can imagine at that time trying to look for a relationship, you're like, will I ever get another opportunity? You know, thankfully, it's not quite like that anymore. But now young people have to compete with AI or other people starting relationships with AI. And so they're pulling themselves out of the relationship pool, so to
Mhm.
speak. And because they're like they're feeling good, they've got, a companion of sorts. And then if somebody goes to talk to that person who is so used to having their AI companion make them feel good all the time, knowing
Mhm.
the perfect thing to say at just the right moment, etc., then when they're having an interaction with a real person, it's uh, like this, it feels, it's harder. It definitely is harder, I would say. It's harder for the person who's approaching that person who has the relationship with the AI.
Mhm.
And it's harder for the person who has the relationship with the AI because in both instances, it's like it's not as smooth as um, the computer gives you. It's the
Right.
same with like, not to be crass, but guys who look at porn.
Mhm.
That's easier, you could say, than actually having a real relationship, right? Um, but it's not as fulfilling. I'll tell you that, you know? And it's harder to get into a real relationship, both for that guy and also for any woman who might approach that guy, because the expectation in that guy's mind is different than reality, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It is, I think it is a bit harder with relationships, but I do find that right now there's a group of people that I'm meeting that are just, I would say, waking up. They're more aware what's going on in the world. They're being more conscious of actually having relationships face to face with people, whether that's a friendship or a romantic partner. Um, I am meeting groups of people who are more like that, and even if they're not on the same pathway of doing self improvement or personal growth work or anything like that, there is something that's happening with people who are realizing things aren't great, and maybe we shouldn't be always doing these things. And I mean, down here in Mexico, I've got a number of people who were in groups and we're mixed, Mexican foreigners. We're not just one or the other. And it's really become about because people were looking for real, real relationships, right?
Yeah.
So it is interesting to see the shift happening in certain groups of people where they may not be on the same path on those other things, but they're coming together because they are searching for relationships, like real ones.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that happens, especially for people, I would say about my age, maybe a little bit younger and older, right?
Mm,
And I think that's because we experienced what it was like growing up, having real relationships, not being attached to our phones, as children and things like that, right?
mhm,
Even though I did have a phone at a really young age, but it wasn't a smartphone. No, not by, any stretch. It was one of those like Nokia bricks with like the snake game on it. And, it wasn't even a color background. It was just literally just, the green glow.
mhm,
You remember? And so I'm just, I'm really concerned about the young people growing up today because they have never experienced anything different than what they're getting. You know what I
mhm,
mean? And so I think they might have perhaps that feeling of like something's not right or I'm not enjoying this, but it's going to be more difficult for them to get out of that whatever routine that they're in
mhm,
because they're not going to have really an alternative to um, whatever they grew up with. So like for us, we didn't grow up with social media or anything like that. So it's really, I think, a lot simpler. I'm not going to say it's necessarily easy, but it's a
mhm.
lot simpler for us to go, forget this, And, I see it all the time. Um, my mom's one of these people who she'll be like, you know what? I'm quitting Facebook. And she'll just quit it. But I think for a lot of people, uh, young people especially, it's like all of their friends are on whatever, social media they're using.
Mhm,
And that's how they connect. And there's a lot less of in-person meeting, or if there is in-person meeting, it's also centered around um, either using social media or this trend on TikTok or the
mhm,
the latest news stories coming out, things like that, right? And so I've heard from a lot of young people, and by young I mean like maybe high school, university age group. I've heard from a lot of these people that uh, they feel like yeah, I don't like this stuff, but then I can't connect or I can't be a part of the friend group. It's similar to like how with the iPhone, if you have an
mhm,
iPhone and you're texting somebody else with an iPhone, it gives you a blue, text bubble. But
mhm,
if you text somebody who is not an iPhone user, it'll give you a green text bubble.
mhm,
And then what ends up happening is just by virtue of I don't really like the interface, that sort of stuff, then the people who have iPhones will start to exclude from group texts and things like that the people who don't have iPhones.
mhm,
And so even if you're the person who's like, I don't really care for iPhone, I'm not really about, joining the bandwagon or anything like
mhm,
that. If you want to continue with your friend group
mhm,
and you don't want to be excluded, not because they don't like you, but because that is the psychological effect of what Apple is actually doing with those text bubbles. It's their marketing to get you to, hey, I know our marketing otherwise didn't work on you, but
mhm,
now we're going to turn your friends against you, and now it does work, right? And so, saying all that just to say that the young people of today, I I think they'll have a harder time. Like I don't disagree with you that there are a lot of people who are noticing, recognizing, hey, something is not right. I don't agree with this, and
mhm.
um, finding different ways. But I think for a lot of the young people, even them having that sentiment, they don't know, well, what else can we do? Right.
Mm,
And again, this is why I feel like I'm called to reach out to those people like, hey, okay, look, there is an alternative. And if I could speak frankly, this is the
mhm,
best alternative. There is no other alternative. Because what we're doing, what we're talking about in our group is how can we make this society, this world, everything
mhm,
best for everyone involved? How can we ensure that nobody is left out,
mhm,
and left out being like no one ends up being the poor person in a third world country who has to sell their child just to make it an extra 3 weeks. You know,
mm,
let's eliminate that completely. Let's eliminate the possibility of that by all of us as individuals taking care of one another, because that's what it really takes, you know?
mm,
And anything else, I mean, there are other things that sound cool, right? But I feel like if it falls short of doing that,
mhm,
uh, then it's just only going to recreate in a roundabout way the situations that we have today, the life that we have today, where the vast majority of people are recognizing, even if you're in a position where you're better off than a lot of people, you can recognize, yeah, but it's still not right, you know?
mm, mhm. So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there about the relationships and the young people, but moving forward with your kids and what you're seeing right now, I mean, obviously there's the support of the community. Obviously, you're using tools to help them to grow because they see you using them. But how are you really going to shift it for your kids or for that next generation who are so entangled with social media and their life and their I guess even who they are as a person is attached to social media.
Yeah.
How are you going to change that or make a difference?
Yeah. So for my kids personally, that's
Hmm.
easy. Like we don't have a TV in our house. They are not going to get smartphones until who knows? Who knows? But it's definitely going to be a decision that we all come to together as a family um, when it makes sense.
Hmm.
And right now, that just does not make sense. Like I cannot see that making sense until such a point where it's like we're using the smartphones maybe because it's a, I don't want to say practical thing,
Hmm.
but it makes sense from the perspective of, hey, you need to understand this because this is what other people are experiencing. This is what they are using and fighting against just for their own sanity, you know? And so from the starting point of understanding smartphones and understanding technology, we're not going to be like, those people, we're not going to be Amish. We're not going to be so afraid of technology. Nothing against the Amish, but you know what I mean? Like we're not going to go to that extreme where we say we can't use technology,
Mm,
and be afraid of it. But we're also not just going to blindly allow these things to take root like how a lot of families are currently doing. Because I guess just to put it really plainly, a lot of people right now will give their children iPads or a phone or something like that
mhm,
just to distract them, just to be kind of like a babysitter almost,
mhm,
where they maybe need to get some things done around the house, or um, they just want some peace and quiet to themselves, whatever the rationale is. We are really not doing that because um, we are supporting ourselves to be here with our children and support them effectively. And I can tell you, I've got a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. But he's not really interested in any of those things right now, right? But with the 2-year-old, I would say because we did not just sit her in front of an iPhone or a tablet or anything like that, or put on movies for her or anything. Because we did not do that, she is so present with us
Mm-hmm.
and so intelligent and so clear in her speaking to us, her explanations, her talking with us, her letting us know what she wants. She's very clear. And it's really cool because I know I've seen other kids and, kids much older than she is and how they act. And I'm like, wow. Like, I could say that I feel lucky, but I also know that like we've created this. We've like intentionally made it this way, and we didn't give in to the quote unquote easy route of, well, just give your kid a screen and, let them run off and they'll come back in a few hours and you'll feel great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's that. On top of that, we're actually supporting our kids to understand reality. So we explain a lot of things around us to the
Mm-hmm.
extent where it may seem like my daughter, it may seem like she's not interested in what we're talking about. She may seem like she's not processing what we're talking about in that moment, but then she always surprises us with what she actually did retain from what we talked about. Even if I said it just like one time, I'm like, whoa, that's so cool. And so um, we are supporting her with understanding things that are perhaps concepts that are much bigger
Mm-hmm.
than um, what the average person might expect for a child her age can do or
Mm-hmm.
can understand. And we're going to continue doing that because we're not going to limit what she's able to understand based on our projection of like, no, you won't get that. Obviously, we're going to have patience
Mm-hmm.
for, you know, the chance that she's not going to get it, which is more likely, right?
Right.
But we're also supporting her to be able to process information, understand it. And, you know, I shared this story. I know you heard this before, but I think it's worth repeating. Um, I just heard the story recently of like Warren Buffett when he was younger, like, in his teens, he went over to one of his friends' homes, and I forget the friend's name, right? But
Mm-hmm.
he went over to his friend's house, and we'll call him Dave. And he saw that Dave had a pinball machine in his garage, and Dave's tinkering with it. And Warren Buffett's like, "Hey, Dave, what are you doing with that pinball machine?" And Dave's like, "Oh, I'm fixing it." And Buffett's like, "Well, how how'd you get it?" Dave's like, "Oh, it cost like $10. Somebody was just basically giving it away because they thought it was broken, but I realized I could fix it."
Mm-hmm.
And Warren Buffett's like, "Well, how much do you think it's going to cost you to fix that?" And he says, like $3, something like that. And then, Warren Buffett's like really business minded. By this time, I don't know how much you know of his story, but by this time he had read all of the books at his local library in the business and finance department, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something that, you know, a kid today is doing.
No.
That's not something that you would even do if you don't have an interest in reading or if you're not able to process information, those sorts of things, right? Um, and so if you're not comprehending, you're not going to continue reading these books. But he had read all of these books and he'd already started some businesses when he was younger, even. And so his mind is tinkering when he hears this and he says, can you get like, do you think there are other pinball machines like this that you could get for this cheap, that you could fix for this cheap? And Dave's like, yeah, definitely. And so together they go off and they start talking to local business owners. They go to the barbershop and they say, hey, we work for Mr. Johnson. There's no Mr. Johnson, but they just made it up because they were kids. They're like, we work for Mr. Johnson. He wants us to present you this pinball machine and this opportunity. If we put this pinball machine in your shop, every week we'll come by and take the coins out of it and we'll split it 50-50. 50% will go to Mr. Johnson, 50% will go to you. And they found 40 something businesses around them that said yes to this. They agreed to this. And on top of that, what they did with the money that they earned, they found that somebody was selling their broke down Rolls Royce.
Mm.
Somebody had a Rolls Royce that they were selling for just a few $100s, like $300, right? And they found, okay, Dave looked at it and he's like, I think I could fix this. And it'll only cost us like a couple $100s more. So they buy this Rolls Royce. Dave fixes it. And it's fixed up enough where they are renting it out on the weekends for $100 a day.
Wow.
And during the weekdays, they're driving this thing to school. Can you imagine some teens that found a Rolls Royce and they're driving it to school and they're making money off of it, right? Isn't that amazing?
Oh, wow. I don't, you know what? I don't think I actually knew, I knew some of Warren Buffett, but I didn't know about all this history. So,
Isn't that cool? But here's the coolest part about it. The coolest part about it is by the time that he's ready to go off to college, he had saved up, not just made, but saved up so much money. The amount would be like in the hundreds of thousands in today's money, right?
mhm.
But he had saved up so much that he went to his parents and he said, whatever you were thinking of, spending on college for me, you don't need to do that. I've got it. And in fact, whatever inheritance you were thinking of giving to me, I don't need that. Go ahead and give it to my siblings, give it to my sisters, right? And I look at that and I'm like, wow, there's somebody who talk about getting a real inheritance,
Mhm.
instead of it being, I was just at a meeting with a bunch of, I would say, really well-to-do entrepreneurs that live in my area, right?
Mhm.
And they were asking serious questions of, you know, how much money should I leave to my children? And, I want to put it in a trust. I want to make sure that they don't squander it. But like, do you think it would be bad if I left them, and they're talking about like millions, etc. Like, or should I leave them less because I don't want to spoil them? Like, this is the way that they're thinking, right? They're
Mhm.
thinking like, I want to leave them money, but I don't want it to change them. And I want them to actually, I want it to be of use to them, And we were talking about that. And it's funny because, like, a real inheritance is for your child to be like Warren Buffett, where they're so confident that they're like, you know, the money I don't necessarily need.
Mhm.
Like that's cool, that's great, but like I can handle it. I thank you, mom and dad, for preparing me so much for this world that I feel like I can handle anything. And that's the way that I'm preparing my personal children
Mhm.
to go out into this world because that's what I would have wanted.
Yeah. I mean, I would have loved that too. And my parents did what they knew was best for, right? They didn't have any other resources, so they did what they knew was best to try to prepare me for the world, but it certainly isn't what you're talking about.
Right, right. And
So,
and everybody's doing, I think, their best. I find it I don't think that the vast majority of people out there are actively trying to do their worst. You know, but sometimes like, you know, um, you kind of just get caught up in trying to survive and your best
mm,
becomes like you're not actively thinking like, I'm giving 100% in this moment. It's just like I'm doing the best that I can with what I have, and it is hard. It's challenging. I totally empathize with that,
mhm,
and that's why I have an education company because it's like that's what we're sharing with people is okay. I am 100% certain about doing this with my children. Like I
mhm,
know the result that I'm getting, and I can do that with other people's kids too. Like I know that, and
mhm,
so I'm just looking for the parents who they're like, I am trying my best, but I'm also recognizing that like maybe I don't know everything, and maybe
Hmm.
there are some things that I'm not sure how to do this, and I'd like to, and I'm open, you know? And so we find those parents and we're like, okay, here's how you do it, you know?
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, I was trying my best before, I got to where I am,
Hmm.
and my best was not cutting it. And that sounds really like, I think that sounds critical and like a judgment, when you say that. Like if you were to hear that from somebody else, like, hey, your best is not cutting it, it sounds really
Hmm.
critical, and like you might feel judged by that. I think the average person would feel judged. I know I would have,
Hmm.
hearing that. But it's also like there's I think a lot of opportunity when you do hear that. If you're open to hearing that, there's a lot of opportunity to actually change and grow and do things differently. Like if you're open to hearing, hey, your best is just not cutting it, and you don't take it personally,
Hmm.
and you can look at it objectively, and you're like, yeah, that is the case. My best is not cutting it, but I would like for it to. You know,
Hmm.
I want to change. I'm not so stubborn that I'm gonna dig my heels in and say, "Oh, how dare you?" You know, but rather I'm gonna say, "Okay, well, do you have an alternative? Like, are you just gonna criticize, or do you have something like a solution?"
Hmm.
And um, you know, this is like again, my solution is, hey, I'm doing this with my kids, and I'd love for everybody else to do this with their kids too, because then we'll have a world of confident children
Hmm.
who are also competent, who are also willing to work together to actually change this reality, change the society that we've created, we've constructed together to be one where nobody gets left out.
Right. So I know a lot of people who are outsiders are going to hear this conversation so far, and now they're probably going, "You sound like you're talking about utopia."
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
like, how would you respond to that? Because I mean, it does sound like a utopic world where it doesn't
I always find that,
seem like it could be reality, right? You know what I
yeah,
mean? But
yeah.
but
I always find that really interesting because it's like, okay, but what's wrong with utopia, right? Because I know exactly, like, I had this kind of thinking of, uh, that makes me feel uncomfortable whenever I would think of like the word utopia.
Mhm.
It would make me feel uncomfortable. And it wasn't, what I realized later on was it wasn't the idea of everything being perfect that made me feel uncomfortable. It's what I it's what it implied, what I assumed came along with that made it uncomfortable. And so for me, and I think this is probably the case for anybody who might have that sort of thought going on in their mind, is what I implied that also meant was somebody is like, you can't, first off, you can't have a utopia. It's not possible. Second off, is if there's a utopia, then that means that somebody has an idea of how they want things to be and what would be perfect in their mind. And you have to fall in line and acquiesce to that idea or that utopia, even though perhaps deep down you don't really like it. You're not really into it. It's not what you enjoy. And
Mhm.
so you're basically being forced into something that looks pretty on the outside, but inside it's killing you. Those are all the associations that I made. Can you think of any others?
Well, I think a lot of people might, if they understand, they might associate utopia with Marxism or
Oh, okay.
socialism.
Okay, sure, sure. Yeah. And well, okay. That aside, I'll just say this. as far as the utopia thing, because I'm not actually promoting utopia. Um, but uh, what I am saying is this. I'm saying we can create a world that would be best for everyone, where if it's something that is creating where you're forced, you
Mhm.
actually are not like, I don't love this and this is terrible for me, then that would not be best for you. That doesn't make
Mhm.
sense, right?
Mhm.
And so somebody might say, well, then that there's so many people with differing opinions of what they want and what they think is best, and so it's so complex that that can't possibly happen. That's the next place that,
Mhm.
this thought pattern goes, right? Um, and I would say, well, but there are some things though that everybody needs that it's very easy to say, well, okay, it would be best if everybody had, as an example, clean drinking water,
Mhm.
nutritious food for their bodies, not, what I think Catherine should eat,
Right.
but what's actually best for your body, and what you enjoy eating, and the proportions that you enjoy eating that in, and etc. Right? Um, it would be best if everyone had a shelter, like, a place to live that they could call their home. And they had, clothes that they could wear that would protect them from the elements. All these things are really simple, right?
Mhm.
If they had education, like a real education, that would be best. It wouldn't make sense for us to say, well, no, some people should be really dumb and we're just going to keep them dumb. Which is, by the way, I don't know if you've seen what's going on these days, but kind of feels like that's it. Um, but yeah, I think those are all things that it would be really simple to get agreement on,
Mhm.
and actually quite simple to execute on as well, because we have the resources for all of those things already today, right? So that's not an impossible order. Now,
Mhm.
beyond that, what climates people like to live in or what kind of music they like to listen to, that's kind of beyond the scope of what I'm talking about right now. Um, and I think people will still have their personal preferences, and that's fine, right?
Mhm.
Um, but we could eliminate today, uh, we could eliminate poverty.
Mhm.
We could eliminate a lot of diseases that are caused by poverty or lack of nutrition. Like
Mhm.
that, or just sanitary conditions. We can eliminate a lot of that today. You remember, ah, this is going to sound like ages ago, but remember back in 2020 when the whole world got together, apparently to stop a massive deadly virus. Every
Mhm.
government in the world was coordinated on this effort. Do you remember that?
Mhm.
If we could coordinate, and I think the average person um, went along with that because they felt, hey, I don't want to kill people unnecessarily. Like, if this is actually the case,
Mhm.
just taking a very understanding approach to it. If this is actually the case that my me going out could potentially cause somebody else to die, or myself, or my family, or then you know what? I'm going to stay inside, and I'm going to be okay with staying home for weeks on
Mhm.
end, and the average person went along with that because it's like, I don't want to kill people unnecessarily. What I'm saying is we already have a system, a world right now where people are dying unnecessarily because of the conditions of that system. And we
Mhm.
can change that without um, adverse negative effects on society as a whole, or even
Mhm.
on the people who are living well right now, right? And so that's what I'm really saying right now, and really advocating for. But also, uh, again, I think the vast majority of people, when they think of utopia, they're thinking of the negative associations with the idea of having a world where everybody has their needs met, and things seem ideal because they think it's not possible. But
Hmm.
also, but also, I think in general, the average person wants to go to heaven, right? And isn't that supposed to be like, idealistic? Like idyllic.
Hmm.
It's in a sense you could call that a utopia, right?
Right.
Um, and there's no qualms about that, right? And it's just because in today's world, there are these negative associations where it seems like it's going to be forced on you. And then bringing in the socialism, the Marxism, communism, that sort of thing. I think obviously there are problems with communism, Marxism, and socialism,
Hmm.
but I think those problems stem from, uh, if I could put it succinctly, and we'll see if I can do that. But those problems stem from one, people not understanding what communism or Marxism actually is. They've never studied it. And so they've been given this understanding that is a very cartoonish characterization that maybe you heard from school, maybe you heard from the news or from politicians, whatever. Um,
Hmm.
and again, I'm not advocating for communism, and there are a lot of problems with it, right?
Yeah.
And Marxism, etc.
Hmm.
But when you understand it more, you can see very clearly what those problems are, and you can also see that there were some, let's say, seemingly good intentions with the ideas, right?
Right.
It pointed out problems effectively, I would say. And it tried to come up with some ideas of like how to deal with those problems. Those ideas I don't think work, not at least in the way that they're proposed. But also, uh, a lot of the things that communism advocates for and socialism, the way that they're implemented, it's through force. And again, that's not the way. That doesn't make
Right.
sense. And the only way that you can have what I'm talking about, which is I wouldn't use the word utopia, right?
Hmm.
I literally just say, a world that's best for all.
Okay.
Um, but the only way that you could actually have that is if every individual is in agreement with that. And the only way that that can happen is if every individual is educated in a sense where they can actually understand why it would make sense. Not forced,
Hmm.
not brainwashed per se,
Hmm.
like I think, I say per se because I feel like the average person today's their education is brainwashing, you know?
Hmm.
Um, but actually educated to the point where you can understand the world around you and go, huh, uh, you know what? Actually, I've been doing things this way, but I just learned about this over here, and it just makes so much more sense. I'm gonna just move all the things that I was doing over here to over here, and oh wow, look at that. Look at how much better that is for, my life or whatever. So that's like I said, in a nutshell. Yeah.
Oh man. I mean, we can go forever and go really deep on so many topics. And I know there's we've had some great conversations like 4 a.m. at the campfire, right? So
Yes.
when we
Yes.
get these get-togethers. So I know we could go for a long time. But I think what I find really great with a community is just how supportive people are in good and bad, and also that they will keep you accountable. And I think that's really missing right now is accountability for anyone or anything with consequences, right? Um, it seems like right now we're in a society where, oh, we're told not to do something and we know we shouldn't, but we do it anyways. And oh, look, there was no big thing. There was maybe a slap on the wrist and that was it. And it's like, don't do that again. But nothing really happened too drastic that stops people, right? But I think
Yeah.
with our group, I mean, I've definitely had it where, not in a bad way, but in a very loving, supportive way, been held accountable
Hmm.
to, to do the work, to go deep, to face those things
Yeah.
that I needed to face, and really heal from them, because I would do surface level work,
Yeah.
right? I did that for years.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, I
That's
think
great.
there's a real opportunity there for that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, you know, I think a lot of times, so when I'm talking about education, it's more than just 1+1 or ABC or, it's more than just the academic stuff that you're getting at school. Um, but rather it's like, actually, shouldn't our education help us to understand the world around us? Shouldn't it help us understand ourselves? Shouldn't it help us understand our purpose in this life? Why is it that, we go to school and we never learn how to solve poverty, actually? It's just something that maybe someone out there one day will figure out on their own somehow, but we're not going to make any concerted effort towards it. So now open up your textbooks to page, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, I think, you know, when you're talking about like going deep within yourself, it's like we should be able to understand ourselves. We should be able to support others around us to be able to, like you said, heal from basically like what this world has done to us. And, I wouldn't say the world per se. I would say more like the environment that we as people, whether in the past or today, um, have created.
Hmm.
It's the environment that we have created that we need to change because, man, can you imagine creating a world or a society where we don't have to heal from our environment? We don't have to heal from our childhood.
Hmm.
How beautiful would that be? Like,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I don't know very many parents. I'll say this. I'll say it like that. I don't know very many parents who would not want that for their children. You know, I think every parent, or at least most parents, want the best for their children if
Hmm.
they can. You know, and even the parents who, because I'm thinking right now in my mind when I say that, I'm thinking I know that there are parents out there who are potentially addicted to drugs or something like that,
Hmm.
and they really just cannot be there for their children. And even them, like, well, why are they addicted to drugs in the first place? There's some trauma there that makes the appeal of, uh, you know, being lost in some, different dimension in their mind seem better than being here in reality, you
Hmm.
know? And yeah, I would love to see a society, and this is what we're creating. Part of the vision is, hey, let's also support those people so that that's no longer a thing. We could end poverty, we could end addictions, we could end those things. And it would just take everyone, even the people who think like, oh, that sounds really like a utopia. Like this guy,
Hmm.
he's just got big dreams and that's never gonna happen. It takes you people who are thinking that to give it a try. Because why not? Like I would rather be the kind of person who strives for the very best and doesn't allow myself to hold myself back because of some odd feeling that I get of like, that sounds like really utopia, and I don't like that. But it's not utopia you don't like. It's not that you don't want people to have nice life, right? Or you
Hmm.
don't want to have a nice life. Like if you got the opportunity right now to just snap your fingers and you're in heaven, I don't know very many people that would not snap their fingers, you know? Um,
Hmm.
but if you think there's a negative consequence associated with it, that's what you want to get rid of, right? And so I agree. Let's get rid of those negative consequences or negative potential side effects. Let's not do it that route. Let's not go by the force. Let's not, force people into it, but rather let's educate ourselves so that we can create that together, and let's strive for what's actually best for ourselves and for all those around us. And so, yeah, thank you for saying that, because it's not all going to be pretty and hunky dory the whole way through. Of course not.
Mhm.
I've definitely had tons of experiences where I'm like, I feel like crap because I realize, like, when we were talking about relationships earlier, like,
Right.
I felt like crap because I realized I treated women like crap because of the way that I had understood women in my own mind, which was obviously a corrupted understanding, you know?
Hmm.
But um, it wasn't like uh, I forced my way into, well, I'm just gonna wrangle a good relationship somewhere, It's not like I forced it. It's my wife is not here, under duress. She came willingly. She didn't have to come, um, and it's just basically a decision that we were in agreement on, and we
Hmm.
can do that with so many other things in this world. And so that's why I feel called to do this, but also like I'm looking for the people that can also hear that as well of like, okay, yeah, you know what? I'm willing to strive for what's best for myself
Hmm.
and not allow that excuse of like it just sounds too good to be true, but instead like, okay, how can we practically make this happen? And I'm not going to just let this fall to shambles. And I think the people who have that thought, um that sort of like, I wouldn't necessarily call it skepticism, but just, just a, a healthy pushing back of like, well, I want to understand this. It's a good objection. I think people who have that sort of way of thinking would actually not allow, if they got to doing what we're doing, if they got to see the vision that we're sharing and
Hmm.
being a part of it, they would not allow it to fall into a forced sort of utopia. I'm putting that in quotes.
Right.
But a forced looks good on the surface, but underneath everybody is, actually under a dictatorship. They wouldn't allow that
So
because
no Demolition Man.
no, no, please, no. Yeah, no Terminator, no Matrix, no, you name your movie. We don't want that, right?
Okay.
Um, but what we want is really just like, it's something that has not really been ever done before, and almost like it's never been conceived of before, because the natural inclination for people is to go, it's too many moving parts, it's not possible, forget it, you
Hmm.
know? Um, and so it's a huge undertaking, but you know, this is me putting out the message of like, what else are you gonna do? Are you gonna settle for less? I'm not gonna settle for less, I really, especially because I have kids.
Hmm.
I don't want here's the alternative. The alternative is um they grow up in a world that literally becomes Terminator because, they embody these AIs and the robots, which they're talking about doing right now. They're
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
that right now.
Yeah.
They embody these AIs, and the people who are at the helm of these AI companies, when you look into their lives, they're not the best people. They're not like, you wouldn't look at them and go, this person has high moral standards, and I would like for everybody on the planet to live just like them. No way. If everybody lived like them, um, we would have an even crazier world than what we currently have. It would just be like a dog eat dog, and it really is a dog eat dog world, but it'd be even more extreme.
Mm.
And I don't want to sit back and just you know, watch as that world becomes the reality that my children will live in. I want to actually do something about it. I am actually doing something about it.
Mhm.
And if somebody's watching this and they feel at all like, okay, those are some good points, and I'm curious to see what is this vision, then I would encourage them to join the group Self Perfected, um, and just learn more. Like, see what we're talking about with our community, with just the things that we talk about, the vision that we have, the tools that we share. Just take a look at the very least, because
Mhm.
a lot of people that come into this, uh, you know, I don't know if you're gonna do or if you have done an interview yet with Joe, but
No,
man.
I have not. I haven't had a chance to talk to him and see if he's interested.
Oh, dude, that would be really great interview if you can, because he's one of these people who he just heard about this, what we're doing. He thought it sounded crazy, but he met with some people locally to him, and he liked what they were saying, and he wanted to see, well, okay, before I really like jump both feet into this, I have a family, I have, a wife and a child, and I'd what you're saying sounds really interesting, and I think I might be interested. I'm definitely curious, but I want to see what does the rest of this community look like. And so
Hmm.
he was somebody who joined us on Facebook, and then came to one of our live events because it just so happened to be, right around the corner from him joining us. And when he came to that event, it changed his life. Like, he left that event going from, and I don't want to tell you like all of his story,
Hmm.
but one of the things that stuck out to me was he used to be a chronic smoker, and he never saw himself potentially stopping that ever. Um, and he went from that event, and literally from that day on just decided, I don't need to smoke anymore. And it
Hmm.
wasn't even like something that, somebody was like, oh, you're a bad person if you don't, stop smoking. It was just a decision that he made for himself of like, I don't need to keep smoking, actually. I'm okay. And he stopped.
Hmm.
And I'm sure he'll share this with you eventually, but he's shared this many times on, our hangouts. So I don't feel
Hmm.
like I'm giving any confidential information, but he shared like that changed his relationship for the better with his
Hmm.
wife. And now they're able to communicate on the whole next level, and it's making a better life for their son. And I saw a video of that they posted of their son recently, and he's 6 years old, and he's spelling these big words for a 6 year old. He's like, I'm gonna, and he's telling, in the video, he's making the
Hmm.
video, and he says, I'm gonna spell some words. I'm gonna spell the word sandcastle. And then he spells the word sandcastle. And he's like,
Hmm.
I'm gonna spell some other words. And he just keeps going and going and going. And I'm like, wow, the confidence that this 6 year old has, the competence that he has. And
Hmm.
this was all from someone who was curious enough to go, I want to check it out. I want to see what this is. I'm
Hmm.
interested. And kept taking the next step to now he's like, completely changed my life, and I'm so grateful for this. And I guess I'm just sharing that to say, like, hey, if you listen to this interview, you got this far, and obviously you're curious, obviously, right? And so I know you'll probably put a link in the description or whatever, but follow that link, join the group, and just see what we're all about. Have a conversation with some of us and see what we really mean by community. See what we really mean when Catherine says, we hold you accountable to a higher standard for yourself. Because wouldn't you say, Catherine, like it's to your benefit, right? Even though it's like you got to dig a little deeper, you can't go surface level. It may be uncomfortable in that moment, but isn't it to your benefit at the end of the day?
Yeah, going through it now, yes, but when you're going through it, you don't feel that way.
Sure, sure. But
When you're
isn't
going
that
through it, you're like, why?
yeah, 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 yeah. You're right. You're right. But there's always somebody there when you need to reach
Mm,
out to say like, hey, look, this is rough. This is rough.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And somebody's there to like, hey, I get it. I'm there with you. Let's keep going. You know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you talked a lot about, how you're making a difference with your family and your kids and, your relationships. What is a key thing that you would like to go back if you could give yourself as a 10-year-old boy some information or some advice?
Dude,
What would you want to tell yourself at 10 years old?
so much. So much. There's so much I want to tell my little 10-year-old me, right? Um, man. So this group did not exist when I was 10 years old. So there was no way that I could have found this group, right? Um, but the biggest thing that I would share with 10-year-old me is, hey, um, go find techno tutor. Like you gotta find techno tutor. That would be the biggest thing that I would share with myself. But also, uh, man, just there's just so much there because 10-year-old me was completely different than where I am today, completely different than 20-year-old me, even.
Hmm.
And there's just so much change from there to here. But I would support myself with the tools that we have, the process that we use. I would support myself with that. And I know I'm not being really like explicit with what that is, because there's just like so much context there that I don't think I could break down in
Hmm.
the short time that we have right now. But um, if you thought I was long-winded on my other responses, um, but yeah, I know what I would share with myself um, would be along those lines of like the tools that we're using specifically, and that's because that has really been what's made the most difference for me is like, hey, it's this. It's being able to reprogram your mind and being able to not be a like I was gonna say not be like a slave to my negative feelings.
Hmm.
But another way that I could say that is like, how sometimes, and I don't know if everybody goes through this, but when I was young, um, when I would feel like a negative emotion, it would just get me down. It would really like if I did something wrong, I could be mulling over that like, I didn't do it right, or I did it wrong, or I messed up. I could be mulling over that for a whole day, you know,
Hmm.
and maybe even more. And um, I was really like influenceable. You know what I'm trying
Hmm.
to say. Really able to be influenced by somebody making me feel bad at that time.
Hmm.
And today, that's just like so much harder to do because I know who I am. Um, but yeah, that's what I would share with myself is um, I would share, hey, listen, you need to find this techno tutor thing, and you need to really go down this path, both feet in, um, and you can question things, but you just need to dive in and um, not be scared or skittish or avoidant of just taking in the information. Um, because that has really truly supported me. Like that's what I the process that I've been through today to change so much, even in my later years. I'm saying later years as an adult because
Mhm.
I felt like as a child it was so much easier to change. I had way less responsibilities, less dug in my ways of thinking,
Mhm.
and yet still today as an adult I've changed so much, you know? And so those would be the things that I would share with my 10-year-old self of like, you got to do this. And,
Mhm.
you know, don't be afraid to dive all the way in, and investigate as much as possible. Because uh, as an adult, I was a little bit like hesitant of, going through this education process of like, do I really want to? No, I don't really need to know that. I no, that's not for me. That's interesting, but not for me. Um, and I feel like that slowed me down doing that, you
Mhm.
know. Well, I know it slowed me down. It's not that I feel like I know it did because
Mhm.
later on I did come around to looking at those things and actually diving in and going like, holy crap! If I would have known this a year ago, you know, like what was I taking so long for? Yeah. So that's the advice that I would give 10-year-old me. I would also say, dude, you got to build your vocabulary. That wouldn't mean much to 10-year-old me, but I would tell him that anyway because it's so important as well. But yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I could see myself like saying to 10-year-old me right now. Like, man, and I really wish that I could have that opportunity. That'd be so amazing. That'd be so
Yeah.
amazing.
Back to the Future, right?
Dude, it would be so cool because like I wouldn't even worry about like, some people would maybe tell themselves winning lottery numbers or that's what they do in Back to the Future, right?
Mhm.
Um, I wouldn't even concern myself with that at all because uh this would be way, 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 way more um influential in my life in such an impactful way more impactful. It would just be like I almost can't put words to it. But essentially, like that would have changed my life in such an immense way, um, that like thinking about it now, it's like it's like I know that's not possible, but just from thinking of it, it makes me think of how lucky I am right now to have the understanding and the tools and the community and all the things that I have available to me and not take it for granted.
Mhm.
Like actually use it to the fullest because um, there will be a time in the future, I'm sure, where I will look back and either be, you know, really grateful that I continued going or kicking myself that I didn't go faster, that I didn't actually really apply myself, you know?
Mhm.
So, um, yeah, thank you for the question because it really helps me to appreciate like where I'm at right now and really m not motivate myself, but really see why it makes sense to just go even harder today.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I mean, my intention is not to push you to the grave doing this now. So please don't do that. Please spend your time with your family and
Of
friends and,
course.
you
Of
know.
course.
So, but I appreciate you being here and taking the time for this because I know you're busy with your family and your business. And, I know school's back, so you're working with people's schedules outside of that too. So,
Yeah.
thank you very much for
Thank
doing
you.
this. And before we go, is there any last thoughts that you want to share with anybody?
No, I'll just reiterate and just say again, like, hey, if you're still listening, and you have not clicked that link, why not? No, but definitely come join us. We have fun. I talk a lot in the group. Catherine,
Yeah.
you would agree, right? I talk a lot.
Well, it's better having someone who can talk than someone who's shy and doesn't want to, right?
There you
So,
go. There you
you
go.
know,
There you go. So if you enjoyed me talking, hey, you're gonna enjoy that too.
just
Uh,
don't ever bring up a book or movie because he'll ruin it for you if you haven't watched it or read it yet.
oh,
So,
definitely. I will spoil that movie, spoil that book, but all with good intention. It's not like I mean to spoil it. It's just like I'm trying to get a point across, and it does. That's how you do it, you know. Anyway,
so if you
anyway,
haven't read Lord of the Rings yet, you better catch up.
you better catch up. I am on the second book. I'm almost done with it. Yeah. But yeah, definitely join the group. We have a lot of fun, and it could change your life. You know, you could be one of those people. And so give yourself that chance.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Drake. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Catherine. See you soon.